Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest of Field Fisher's International Data and Privacy Team's AI webinar series. Today we look at the question, DPO and AI Officer, are they one and the same? My name is Hazel Grant and I am the head of data privacy based in our London office. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to be joined by a couple of colleagues from our mainland EU offices, Natalie and Philip, and they're going to introduce themselves a little bit later. For those of you who don't already know us, Field Fisher is an international law firm with offices across Europe, in Silicon Valley and in China. And our privacy team works across all of those offices. We've been providing this webinar series using insights from members of all of our offices. We're a very collaborative team and we provide strategic and actionable privacy solutions. So let's look at a quick recap on the webinar series so far. You can see the titles and the issues we've tackled in the series part 1. If you'd like to listen into some of these, then please go to our privacy team YouTube channel and view the AI playlist there. If we go on to the next slide, we can see part 2, and you can see highlighted the session that we're going to do today. Now, when I heard about this topic, I simply pushed aside the other Field Fisher privacy partners and said, this one's mine, I'm having it. This is because I think the DPO role has been crucial for any business wanting to have an effective data protection compliance program. So I thought, what about AI? We need to be speaking about the person or people who will be responsible on a day-to-day basis for the compliance of AI within a business, just in the same way as the DPO is responsible for promoting data privacy compliance. So enough of that. Let's meet our speakers for a moment. So Natalie, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please, and say a few words?
Yes, hello everyone. I am Natalie Poupard. I am counsel in the tech and data team in Field Fisher Brussels office. Before joining Field Fisher, I have worked as a DPO and in-house legal counsel in several organizations across different sectors, in particular in the financial and life science sector.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Philip, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Philip Reinisch. I'm head of our tech and data team here in our Field Fisher office in Austria. I've been advising on all areas of IT law for over 10 years with a strong focus on data protection laws. My experience in the tech sector has involved me working with startups, large multinationals, public bodies, NGOs, in data and telecom projects. And I'm looking forward to our webinar today.
Thanks so much, Philip. And I'll just finish up with a few words about myself. Hazel Grant, as I said, I'm going to be your chair for the day or for the session. As well as heading up our London team, I work with a number of IT and cloud service providers. And over the last year or so, we have been increasingly asked about AI, generally the application of the EU AI Act, but also accountability and compliance surrounding implementation of AI, which is why I'm so interested in today. So let me just turn to a few housekeeping points, but please do ask us questions using the question function on your screen. We've left some time to deal with questions and we're hoping to get through a few. If we don't manage to complete them, we will correspond with you by email after the webinar. We are planning to end at 5 p.m. UK today promptly. We will send you a copy of the slides and also a recording, so please don't feel that you have to scribble everything that we've said on the way through. Finally, please do subscribe to our blog, keep an eye out for more webinars within this series, and do sign up for the future webinars. So let's have a look at the overview of the webinar topics today. I'm going to ask each of the speakers to take it in turns to talk about the different roles, obligations, responsibilities And then in sessions 3 and 4, we have more of a direct discussion comparing the two roles and looking at practical implications of fulfilling a DPO and an AI function. So let's make a start and move on to Natalie, who's going to take us through some of the DPO issues.
Yes, so as I said, I have been a DPO for many years, so this is something I know pretty well. So the position of the DPO has been actually around longer than the GDPR. This function was already introduced by the Directive of 95, leaving it up to member states to actually impose it or not through their national legislation. So the GDPR actually harmonized the situation by defining clearly what a DPO is and what a DPO does. I think it's useful to understand well the scope of the DPO function to potentially leverage these learnings for this new AI function. So when we discuss the DPO function, the first key element is the designation itself of the DPO. In which cases should organization have a DPO? Well, the GDPR sets out the case in which a DPO must be appointed, notably for controllers and processors whose core task consists of large-scale processing operation or large-scale processing of special categories of data. So this is something that is pretty clear now. In addition, there might be additional local requirements. For example, in Germany, maybe you know this, controllers and processors have to appoint a DPO if they employ at least 20 persons dealing with the processing of personal data. So I think usually most companies have now clarified whether they actually need a DPO or not. Nevertheless, we found out there are still many gaps there. This has been flagged recently by the EDPB. For example, many public authorities still haven't decided yet to appoint a DPO. So that's quite concerning. Concerning the qualification of the DPO, what kind of qualification should a DPO have? So in other words, what should the DPO background be? Well, the GDPR requires the DPO to have a wide range of knowledge and skills, consisting mainly in expert knowledge in data protection and practices. So according to the EDPB, mere experience is not enough to fulfill the legal requirements. The DPO must be a super expert in data protection and receive consistent and continuous education around this. The EDPB has clarified this point. This data protection knowledge actually includes expertise in GDPR, case laws, EDPB's guidelines, obviously, national data protection laws and practices, and that's very interesting, the EDPB says that DPOs should also be expert in the new developments relating to the European data strategy and the so-called Big Five laws, the DSA, the DMA, the DGA, the Data Act, and the Artificial Intelligence Act. So this has been mentioned by EDPB in the Coordinated Enforcement Action Report that you might have heard about and which was published in January around the DPO function. So I think that's an interesting point to note that DPOs should have knowledge about the AI Act. In addition, a DPO must have adequate knowledge about the industry. So, and the organization where the activities are taking place. I think this is an important point. So basically, the DPO must have data protection knowledge and some adequate knowledge about the industry in which is working. Another important point is the level of involvement of the DPO within the organization. So the GDPR requires that the DPO is involved properly and in a timely manner in all issues which relate to the protection of personal data. So basically, the DPO just cannot do their job properly unless they are consulted on all issues that are relating to data protection within the organization. So to be clear, the consultation of the DPO should actually be embedded in the project lifecycle of the organization, so that for each new project involving processing of personal data, the DPO will be consulted. And that's obviously a tricky point because we can find out that the DPO is not always involved in all data protection related matters. Regarding the resource allocated to the DPO or the Chief Privacy Officer, well, the DPO must have access to the necessary resource for the performance of his duties. Okay, so the resource needed, they depend obviously on the type of organization, the type of activities, the nature of the processing. So typically, the DPO needs to have more resource at their disposal, and that's very clear. That's usually a problem. So this means, very practically talking, that the DPO should have a budget to get training, to get the necessary tools, to promote its function internally, and so forth. In addition, the DPO should also have sufficient time to fulfill all its duties, and that's often also a problem. According to EDPB, ensuring compliance with this provision of GDPR would be significantly easier, I quote, with a dedicated full-time DPO supported by a team and a deputy DPO where appropriate. So that's also an interesting information from the EDPB, because the EDPB considers that it would be best to have a DPO which is fully dedicated only to data protection matters and not to other duties. Another crucial point is the independence of the DPO. This has been debated a lot. The DPO should be an independent advisor. So the DPO should not be involved in making any decision whatsoever about processing of personal data. That is often also a problem. The decisions about processing personal data or not are not the decision of the DPO, but it's precisely the subject of its review. So it's important that the DPO doesn't take this kind of decision. Also, the DPO should not receive any instructions on how to carry out his task. And that's quite important. For external DPOs, when there is a contractual relationship between the controller and the DPO, well, in that case, the controller must ensure that it does not give, directly or indirectly, instructions to the DPO on how to carry out its task. That's a tricky point as well. So the criteria of independence of the DPO are the following. It's basically the control over its own budget, its own financial autonomy, and also the ability to decide, to give advice, and to prioritize its own tasks. Finally, to make sure that the DPO is independent, safeguards should be put in place to prevent negative consequences related to DPO decision, for instance, like a dismissal. This point is a legal requirement. So this protection of DPO is a legal requirement according to GDPR. I think this is also an important point if you are considering creating an AI officer position. Another important point is the point of conflict of interest. As per GDPR, the DPO may fulfill other tasks and duties. That's well known. And I would say many DPOs actually have two hats. And this is usually the case. A DPO with several hats, for example, a DPO who would also be head of compliance or head of legal. This you can find a lot in many organizations. Well, the rule is that the controller or processor must ensure that the performance of additional tasks and duties will not result in a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest actually may exist when a DPO holds a role or position within that same organization that would involve deciding, purpose and means of processing activities. And this can be the case, for instance, for the head of compliance, who has to decide which kind of personal data would be processed, for example, for fraud preventions. For external DPO, for instance, lawyers, law firms cannot be entrusted with tasks that can conflict with the DPO task. So that's an important point. For example, they may be asked to represent their client in court for data protection case, despite acting as their DPO. So that's an important point to take into account. The EDPB also mentioned rightfully that the external DPO cannot act as the DPO of the controller and its processor. Well, that seems pretty obvious, I think, but apparently this happens a lot, that the same person would be appointed as external DPO for a processor and for its own, for the controller, sorry, and its own processors. So in conclusion, there should be internal procedures to avoid that conflict of interest are taking place. The last point is the reporting to the highest management level. This is often a practical problem. I mean, I'm pretty sure you know this already. So GDPR requires DPO to report to the organization highest management level. Often you will find that the DPO reports to the compliance head, for example, who reports to the business integrity head, who reports to another director, who also reports to another director. So practically, there might not be a direct reporting line between the DPO and the board, although there should be. In accordance with the rule, this means that the DPO should have a direct access to the highest management level. So that's really important. In the org chart, basically, you should see the DPO have a strict direct reporting line with the highest management level. So a strict line, not a dotted line. So this is also something that has been flagged by the EDPB in its report, and which is an important point. And finally, the DPO should have an explicit guarantee or an opportunity, at least, to report in a written format to the top management on a recurrent basis, and also when needed in case of an urgency. So practically, there should be an opportunity for the DPO to report annually, for instance, to the board or the ExCom or the audit committee. Okay, so Philip, we can go to the next slide to talk about the DPO job description. Okay, so for the DPO, it's good news. We have a clear job description. Okay, so according to Article 39 of GDPR, we know exactly what the DPO should be doing. The DPO should inform and advise, monitor compliance, provide advice for DPIAs, for example, but should also cooperate and act as contact point with the supervisory authority. So practically, the scope of the DPO function is quite clear. The DPO is a control and advisory function, often belonging to the compliance function of the organization. This slide is summarizing the DPO function in its whole. So first and foremost, the DPO is a privacy ambassador within the organization. He's responsible for raising awareness and providing training to the staff involved in processing of personal data. So basically, his role is to take his backpack and go, from one department to another to spread a good privacy word. The DPO also acts as an internal supervisor within the organization. So in particular, the DPO systematically monitors compliance with data protection laws and will provide advice on data protection questions. When it comes to data protection policies and processes applicable to the organization, the DPO plays a very important role, I think, in defining the rules and contributing to the monitoring of the compliance. Also, the DPO is there to evaluate the risk level and provide support for DPIAs. The DPO is also there to support the creation of the register of processing activities, but also to maintain the ROPA. So it is good practice indeed to involve the DPO in keeping the register of processing activities, although this is in principle not really the responsibility of the DPO. Usually is there to contribute to this task. The DPO plays also a big role in managing data subject requests and data breaches. GDPR states very clearly that data subject may contact the DPO on all matters relating to the processing of his or her data. So basically, the DPO is there to assume two roles with regard to data subject. Is the contact point, the first contact point for data subject, is also there to manage data subject requests. Let's not forget that the DPO has a duty of confidentiality as per GDPR. So that's also an added value, I would say, for the DPO in these tasks. And then last but not least, the DPO is there to act as a contact point for data protection authorities. Why? Well, because in his capacity of DPO, he has the necessary knowledge of the organization and of the processing activities. So it's pretty logic that the data protection authority would contact the DPO as the right person to get information. For instance, if there is an investigation. Okay, Philippe, you can go to the next slide. On this slide, I am summarizing the EDPB's recommendation that were published in January of this year. I think it's a very interesting report, and I really advise you to read it, because on this in this report you find a lot of recommendation from the EDPB, recommendation for data protection authorities, but also for controllers and processors. So regarding recommendation for data protection authorities, well, the EDPB is saying, is expecting, I would say, DPAs to provide more guidance around the role of DPO, around its function, its role, around conflict of interest, independence, and so forth. And also, and that's very interesting, the EDPB is saying that it's expecting data protection authorities to take more enforcement action regarding the DPO function. So can we expect more fines, more investigation, and maybe more fines around the DPO function? Well, yes. Well, that's my opinion in any case. Data protection authorities should also increase the use of certification mechanism for DPOs. So this is the opinion of the EDPB that we don't use this enough. And also, yeah, data protection authorities should give more information and enhance the DPO's independence, because this is problematic, according to the EDPB. So the EDPB is also saying that controllers and processors should take action to evaluate the budgetary needs of the DPO function. So really what the EDPB is saying there is that controllers and processors should take should really do a case-by-case analysis to make sure that the DPO has enough budget and verify afterwards whether this budget was sufficient. So this is actually, I think this is brand new, honestly. Controllers and processors should also ensure sufficient opportunities, times, and resource allocated to training for DPOs, including on AI Act. So that's really interesting. So the EDPB is not saying that the DPO should be the AI officer or should be the AI function, but it's saying that in its capacity of DPO, the DPO should have knowledge around all the new EU digital regulation, including the AI Act. So I think that's an interesting point. In addition, controllers and processors should promote the role of their DPO internally. So that's also spending money on this, and involve the DPO in important meetings and projects to ensure annual reporting. So that's also an important point. Controllers and processors should document reasons for diverging from DPO's advice. This is also something that we knew, that's the accountability of the controller, but do companies do that to actually document when they don't follow the opinion of a DPO? Well, maybe not enough, so that's the opinion of the EDPB. Something that is also new is this idea of engagement letters of DPOs. So we should formalize actually the DPO job description in an engagement letter to be sure that we have fully defined the scope of what the DPO does and what the DPO doesn't do, so which is also important. And finally, EDPB is highlighting again that the DPO should report to the highest level of management, which is something we know is still a problem in practice. Okay, Philippe, I think you can go to the next slide.
So, well, thank you, Natalie, for the great overview about the DPO and his tasks, including all the most recent guidelines we got. The next slides, I'd like to explore the implications of the EU AI Act and the organizational adjustments necessary for compliance. Well, maybe some of you were wondering about the term AI officer, and therefore it's important right at the start to note that the EU AI Act does not mandate the formal appointment of an AI officer. Well, this flexibility given by the Act allows companies to adapt their existing structures to meet compliance requirements without the need for creating a new dedicated roles such as the DPO. However, it's crucial to ensure that the compliance with the Act's provisions is thoroughly managed internally. This responsibility can be distributed among existing staff members, particularly those already involved in data protection and regulatory compliance from our point of view. Well, that being said, instead of the term AI officer, the term AI function seems more appropriate, which shall emphasize a flexible and integrated approach to managing AI compliance. Entities and companies shall consider designating a team of specific individuals to oversee AI compliance efforts. While this is not mandatory, as said, this proactive approach can streamline compliance processes and ensure thorough oversight. Let's have a closer look into the AI function as outlined by the Act. There are several key responsibilities to be identified within this role. I think the first issue is risk management. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential AI-related risks is crucial. This in particular includes the classification of the AI systems, in particular high-risk AI systems we've learned before. Entities should develop and implement risk mitigation strategies and an ongoing monitoring to ensure compliance with the regulatory standards is also crucial. Instead of the data protection authorities, most of the member states will have regulatory bodies which are still to be named, and entities shall follow notification procedures to report any compliance issues or risks. Even collaborating with these regulatory bodies will be necessary to stay informed about compliance requirements given by the regulatory authorities. In addition to the risk management and trainings and audits are critical components of the AI function. Unlike data protection, according to GDPR, implementing training programs focused on compliance and ethical AI issues in relation with the use is necessary. These programs should be tailored to different roles within the organization to ensure widespread understanding and adherence. Internal audits, also nothing new. To conduct regular internal audits is necessary to ensure compliance with AI regulations. And as the final main task, I would identify documentation and reporting requirements. It's absolutely important to maintain thorough documentation, including technical documentation on all data sources and including training data and system capabilities. And the regular reporting shall ensure transparency and help to identify areas for improvement. This proper documentation also provides a clear audit trail for any regulatory review. So that being said, what may be the best practices for ensuring flexibility in our AI compliance strategy? Well, I say these strategies are adaptable. So it's kind of recommended to tailor the compliance strategy to the specific operational need of the respective organization. Flexibility seems to be the key to effectively manage AI compliance. This includes flexible responsibilities. Responsibilities for any AI compliance should be flexible and distributed across different roles within the organization. This approach ensures that the various perspective and expertise contribute to compliance efforts. And finally, internal coordination is absolutely crucial to establish clear roles and responsibilities for all AI compliance issues. For that purpose, it might be useful to form a cross-functional team or more teams to manage these efforts effectively. Collaboration across departments will enhance the robustness of the compliance strategy. In conclusion, while the AI Act does not require a designated so-called AI officer, it's still crucial to establish a structured and flexible approach to compliance. By integrating these responsibilities into existing roles and internal coordination, the organization can effectively navigate the complexities of any AI regulation. So that being summarized and considering what Natalie said about the DPO, we provided this slide here as a column where we compare several functions. And following our slides, I might ask Natalie to say something about the DPO role, and I will be happy to cover the AI function and go through the respective bullet points.
Okay, so for the DPO, as I said, thanks to GDPR and the guidance from the EDPB, we have a clear job description of its role. So that's really useful. Organization falling under the scope of Article 37 have a legal obligation to appoint a DPO. So that's very clear, legal mandate and full job description. So what about the AI Act?
AI Act, quite the contrary, no full job description, no formal appointment. Compliance with the Act's provisions is to be managed internally.
Okay, so for the DPO, we already know that the focus of the DPO is personal data. So amongst data, it's personal data.
Right. In the AI Act, we have monitoring requirements, but no restriction to personal data.
Okay, so concerning the principles that are underlying the DPO function, you will find fairness, transparency, accountability, data quality, and in addition, we also have this risk-based approach, which is applicable for the DPO.
Yeah, similarly, the AI function must also ensure these principles, but AI Act has an added emphasis on ethics.
Yeah, so for the function of the DPO is usually considered as a compliance function. So the DPO is there to oversight that personal data is processed in accordance with data privacy law. So that's very clear. It's a compliance function with now this additional information from EDPB saying that the DPO should also have knowledge about other EU digital regulations.
Yeah, the AI function definitely serves a similar compliance role, but extending its oversight to non-personnel data as well, as just been said.
The DPO is there to support many tasks. So the performance of those tasks, in any case, like creating and maintaining a raw path, like performing the DPIAs, for instance, to identify and minimize risk. What about the AI function?
Yeah, well, in addition, the AI function handles tasks like classification of AI systems, notification, and ensuring ethical considerations are integrated into AI systems.
Okay, so and in addition to what has already been said, the DPO performs other typical tasks like developing and updating policies and guidelines, like providing trainings. That's a big part of his job as well. Managing data subject requests and data breaches, reporting to the board, and be the contact point with the regulator.
In the AI function, there will be additional responsibilities included, like identifying and mitigating possible biases in AI systems. And again, as said, developing ethical guidelines for AI development and deployment.
Okay, now about the profile of the DPO. That's an interesting topic as well, because it hasn't been clearly defined yet. So I guess if we don't know exactly what the profile of the DPO should be, how can we decide for AI function? But what you will find most of the time is that DPOs have a legal background or a compliance background or an IT security background, sometimes also a risk background. But in any case, the DPO should have skills in all of those sectors. So even if the DPO has legal background, it should get training in compliance methodology, in risk assessment, and also in security.
Mm-hmm. For the AI function, in addition to skills just mentioned, a strong background in ethics is also crucial, along with expertise in AI, in data science, compliance, and risk management, I would add. Yeah, but it's maybe pretty much the same like the DPO.
Okay, so that's interesting. So we can actually see that when we compare the DPO function with the AI function, that there are some similarities between the two.
Well, I would, frankly speaking, I would say we have a really clear picture of the DPO tasks and responsibilities. And saying this and comparing the AI function, I would say it's a DPO plus a surplus of several tasks, and this is just to be added to the DPO skills, which might be a good guideline by implementing an AI function.
Okay.
So, do we have any questions for the moment so far?
We do. We've had a couple of questions, some of which I have been able to answer whilst I've been going through, but there's been an additional one which I think sits quite nicely after your comparison of the DPO and AI functions. And the question is as follows: do you envisage a conflict between the DPO and AI officer role? The question goes on to say, can it be a dual role? I wonder if that means can the same person carry out both roles? I think that probably is what it means. So what are your thoughts on that? Let's shall I turn to Natalie first?
Yes, well, I think there potentially can be a conflict of interest depending on what on what the AI officer is actually doing, okay? Because what you find currently in many organizations is that there is already an existing AI officer in place, but since this function is actually not a legal requirement, usually the AI officer will sit in the product team, okay? When the product team is there to actually look at expense, cost, you know, choices that are made to spend less money on choices that you do on AI systems. The product team will also look at innovation and stuff like that. Whereas the DPO is there to do a compliance task, so to monitor the compliance, the respect of GDPR requirements. So if the AI officer sits in the first line, okay, so actually in the business and actually taking decisions on whether AI systems should be purchased or developed, then there is a conflict of interest between the two, according to me.
Okay. Okay. So it really depends on the role. Philip, please carry on.
Yeah, I would like to add that I would also see, well, I mentioned it a few times before. Yeah, we have the ethic aspect, yeah, in this regulatory framework, yeah, and the AI Act, and DPO is not used to make any assessment of this, and not entitled to assess data processing from an ethical point of view. Yeah, so this might also be a conflict.
Yes.
You think, Philip, that's a conflict or potentially just a lack of experience? Maybe it's that ethical aspect could be something that the DPO officer could learn or be trained in.
Yeah, well, I think in particular when lots of lawyers are dealing with these compliance issues, I think it's absolutely all lawyers get trained at the university with ethical issues. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure we may learn this. Yeah, because we have to.
Okay. Interesting. We're going to have to rerun this webinar in about 3 to 5 years' time and work out exactly what's happened to the DPO and the AI function. I think it's going to be quite revealing. Anyway, should we perhaps move on and just finish up with our scenario? We thought it might be useful to summarize what we've discussed in a scenario. So let's say we've got an organization. I'm going to call it Acme Services because I usually do. That's my example. It's a medium-sized business. It's a software provider. It provides some hosting and support. And it decides to implement an LLM into its own services. And maybe it will offer that services to its customers in the future. I'm going to pretend that I'm the CEO of Acme Services. Natalie is my DPO, and Philip is he my AI officer or my AI function? I don't know. We're just going to call him AI. And then we're going to ask some questions of both of them and see how they respond. So let's have the first question, please, Philip. I think if you...
Yeah, so here it is.
What's the scope of your role? Philip, you were last speaking, so I'm going to ask you, what's the scope of your role? What's within scope in this LLM?
My role as covering the AI function in our Acme services entity involves ensuring that our AI systems comply with the AI Act and all other relevant regulations. I have to monitor the development and the deployment and the use of AI systems to ensure that they are ethical, fair, and transparent.
Okay.
Risk-wise, I oversee the identification and mitigation of biases in AI models, to ensure a proper data classification and all notification processes if necessary. And I would also develop guidelines for ethical AI use.
Okay, thank you. Natalie, what would you see was within scope of your role in relation to the LLM implementation?
Yeah, I think the DPO are quite used actually to new great ideas from a CEO, from the business. We will implement this or we will use this. For instance, in the HR sector, there's already a lot of AI systems that have been used for many years. So the DPO is quite used to this, and basically the DPO role would be to check the GDPR requirements. So for instance, the DPO is there to check with the project owner whether we should perform a DPIA. So that's the kind of things that a DPO would do when there is such a project.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. So what skills do you think you need to do your role well? Philip, what would you say?
I think my role requires a very deep understanding of AI technologies and, as said, data science. And I have to gain skills in legal and ethical implications of AI use. In addition, skills in risk management and bias detection, I would say, is also necessary, as well as ethical decision making is also essential. I also
sorry, I was just going to, sorry to interrupt you, Philip, but just to say, interesting you started with your technical knowledge. That's an interesting point, but please carry on.
Yeah, well, but I understand why you say it's interesting because the ethical skills, is something. To be honest, I'm quite a bit struggling with, because it's a kind of new, for us in assessing any new, let's call it, product or system, that is in place. So maybe that's why I put it on the second position and not on the first. Yeah, and in addition, I would add, of course, like the DPO, it's absolutely essential that I stay updated on all developments regarding AI, all regulations, of course, and standards, just to ensure the compliance regarding AI.
Thank you. Natalie, what would you say you need?
For DPO, this has already been mentioned. The DPO must have a compliance background, legal knowledge, must understand the organization well. And on top of this, to perform his job well, the DPO should understand fully the technology that is behind. So including the ability to understand new AI systems. I think that's extremely important. Otherwise, it's really complicated, for instance, to perform a data protection impact assessment, because to be able to assess the risk, you need to understand that the technology and the technical aspects of the project.
Okay, great. Let's have the next one. Oh yes, right. Big question for DPOs often. Where do you sit within the company? So maybe Natalie, we start with you and say, where do you sit within Acme?
Well, in a perfect world, the DPO would report directly to the CEO. But in this case, no, I am actually in the compliance department. I am reporting to the compliance head of the company.
Okay. And Philip, where do you sit within the business?
Yeah, I would hope to sit typically between the tech and innovation department, but I shall work very close with legal and compliance teams, and together we may form something like a compliance committee, as it is called sometimes. And in such a committee, my role would be bridging a gap between technical developments and regulatory compliance, I would say. Yeah, and this way I could ensure that the AI initiatives are both innovative and compliant with all, again, ethical standards.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next question that I have for you. I think
Yeah,
we
the
made
reporting.
Yeah, the reporting line we've kind of slightly covered, but let's just cover it quickly. Natalie, what do you say about the DPO? Where does the DPO report?
Well, you know, the DPO is an independent function, but the DPO indeed is reporting at least annually to the board or to the audit committee or to the ExCom. But the DPO is also reporting on a need basis or when there is an urgency immediately to the board.
Okay. Well, I think it's different regarding the AI function. I think I would report to a chief compliance officer if he's in place, or I would report to a CTO, a chief technology officer. But it depends definitely on the organizational structures the company has set up for himself. Well, anyway, it's to be ensured that the so-called AI compliance is integrated with both our or the technological and regulatory strategies of the entity of the ACNE services.
Thank you. And then I think we have one final question. So when did you first hear about this, Philip? When did you know that this was happening?
Well, ideally, or hopefully, I was brought into the discussion as soon as the decision was made to explore the use of a LLM. Any earliest as possible involvement allows me to assess all ethical implications and allows me to ensure that our developments adheres to the all required compliance standards from the very beginning.
And Natalie, when did you hear about this?
Well, you know, when I started as a DPO, the first thing that I did was to make sure that the DPO would be consulted, that it would be mandatory actually to consult the DPO for each new project. And for this, I've headed the DPO in the project lifecycle of the company. So the project lifecycle is basically the process that we have in place to make sure that the DPO will be consulted and that the project cannot go live without the DPO approval. Now, for the future, I think the DPO should be part of the AI committee, you know, obviously, so that when a new AI system or LLM is in project, that the DPO would also be consulted via the AI committee.
Yeah.
I have to say, Natalie, you're a very strict DPO, because most DPOs I speak to find out about these new implementations or projects probably after they've gone live, or very shortly before they've gone live. The money's already been spent and they're being told about them.
Yes,
So,
or even worse, when there is a personal data breach.
well, very true, very true. We are pretty much at time. We have a couple of questions, and I just wondered if I could use this time to cover those questions. So we've had a question which is essentially saying there's a lot happening at the moment. We have all these new regulations, the AI Act, the the DSA, etc., and there's more liability and responsibility for a DPO, risks of conflicts of interest, etc. And the question essentially is, what is the best way to train someone to deal with this? Is there some sort of certification, or is there some sort of diploma that would help make someone a better DPO, or even transform them into a DPO plus an AI officer?
Oh, that's an interesting question. How to train? There is no DPO diploma. Obviously, you can find on the market so many data protection training, which are of good quality. I think, honestly, the better way is to do this continuous training. So I think that's the best way to keep the pace, to get the information around all those new regulation, is to do this continuous training, a bit like doctors. They need to perform training each year. Lawyers, it's the same. Well, I think it would be the same for DPOs, that they should actually perform continuous training. This is a problem most of the time because the DPO doesn't have a budget, and if you don't have a budget, you don't have money to do the training.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if the AI function will have an open tab for budgets. Yeah, but let's see. Well, I think the only difference for the AI function is that that the technical skills for understanding AI, what is a large language model, what's happening there, yeah, from a technical perspective. I think this is a initial need to be trained. Yeah, but agreed. I don't think there are certifications, diplomas, whatever around here. I think it has to be chosen individually. Yeah. By just watching a good YouTube video. Yeah, for example, there are some of them out there. It might be not a very professional advice, yeah, but
well, in any case, the EDPB is really recommending data protection authorities to work on this and to provide more training. Some data protection authorities are already doing it and provide actual training for DPOs, and it's really the idea of the EDPB that it's actually the job of the data protection authorities to provide this training.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So they also have, at least in Austria, I think they don't have the resources for that.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the resources of the authority, isn't it? I think we have time for one question, and I've kept to the end the most difficult one, which I will ask both of you. It's quite a tricky question, and it is: what would you do if you thought a processing activity was unethical? How would you behave? What would you do? What would your reaction be? I think it might depend on whether I'm asking that of the DPO or the AI function.
Yeah, well, for the DPO, it's very clear. The DPO is an independent function, shouldn't receive instructions, shouldn't have pressure. If the DPO is aware that something is happening which is unethical or just altogether not legal, it's the DPO's responsibility to go and have a direct contact with the highest level management. You know, that's the way to do it. So go directly to the board and request to participate to one of their meetings and inform them.
Okay.
Yeah,
and the DPO is protected. So the DPO is protected and shouldn't be fired.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. But I heard one or the other DPO was fired, yeah, somehow. But yeah, so it's not. It's still pressure for the DPOs, yeah, I would say. And I guess it's the same for the AI function, yeah, because there might be even not only reporting obligations, but there might be also notification obligations to the respective authorities. Yeah, if there is a super bias or whatever, yeah, that he detects, yeah, which might be very unveiling this or making this public might be pretty embarrassing for the entity, yeah, using the LLM. And I don't see, or I think like the DPO, such function should be covered somehow, yeah, which I don't see covered at the moment, or guarded, sorry.
We are going to have to rerun this webinar in a few years' time and just see what we've all learnt. But we are unfortunately out of time today. So I'm going to have to draw a line under it and say thank you so much, Natalie and Philip, for your contributions and your thoughts. Thank you everybody for dialing in and listening. I hope you found it useful and interesting. Please do subscribe to our future AI webinars. We will follow up with the slides and the recording, and also a link to our AI regulatory handbook if you're interested. Please do follow us on YouTube and listen to our webinars there. Thank you so much for your attention and your time today. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.